Scaling a business isn't all glossy headlines and overnight success. It's messy, it's tough, and it's full of lessons that no one warned you about. I'm Nikki Jupp, the founder of Talent Gateway, and I've helped over 100 scale-up leaders to build the right team to enable them to grow with confidence. This is Scaling Stories Unfiltered, where founders, CEOs, and leaders share what really happens behind the scenes. No fluff, no filler, just honest conversations to help you grow smarter. So let's get into it.
We did a bit too much micromanagement, and we should have learned more about trusting people and believing in them and allowing them just to get on with it, because you can't really scale rapidly if you're too down, if you're down in the weeds and all that sort of thing. You want to be up here thinking strategy, thinking next market, thinking diversification, and thinking speed. Train your teams, get the right people in the right positions, and let them go.
Welcome back to Scaling Stories Unfiltered, and today I'm joined by someone who turned a costly licensing problem into a market-leading business opportunity. From running pubs in London's East End and Soho to founding the UK's #1 age verification testing company, Ed Heaver has spent over 3 decades in hospitality and compliance. After co-founding Serve Legal in 2006 following a painful lesson about underage sales, Ed built the business into the market leader, conducting over 180,000 audits annually for major retailers like Lidl, Asda and Sainsbury's. Having recently transitioned from CEO to board member with the appointment of Kay Brand as the new CEO, Ed's journey offers valuable insights into scaling a specialised B2B service business and knowing when to step back. Ed, welcome to the show.
So firstly, I just want to say a big warm welcome and thank you for joining me, Ed.
Hello.
As always, as unfiltered as this conversation can be, the better. The objective is to share it warts and all, not just the positives, but some of the real challenging moments that you've been through. Just to kick us off, could you briefly share your journey? What led you from running pubs in East London and Soho to finding a compliance testing business?
Yeah, basically, so I joined Allied Breweries as a graduate trainee in '91, and it was a interesting time. It was a 2-year graduate training scheme, and I lasted about 6 months. And they said, you're a big guy, you can go and run pubs in and around London. At first, it was the young sort of person circuit with all its challenges. And then I moved to the East End of London with more challenges to do with gangsters and drugs and various misdemeanors. And then I moved into the Soho for a quieter life, but a different experience, I suppose. But what it taught me was, one, about every pound, shilling and pence counts in each of your pubs. There are cost centres, and we used to do the most boring day job on a Monday, which was to go through everybody's taking sheets and see what they've spent each week and go, what have we spent 50p on? What have we spent £1 on? And I learned the value of money, making profit out of nothing, because it also was recession time in '91. The beer orders have come in, pubs were under pressure, a bit like they are now, but probably even worse now. And yeah, it was all about squeezing everything you could out of your pub, the different profit centre and all that sort of thing. Yeah, think on my feet, manage people, deal with stress, think about scenarios, A, B, C, what if this happened, what if that happened, what if somebody got struck by thunder or had their car firebombed and all that sort of thing. And it was, thinking on your feet. But at the same time, the sexier bit was thinking about marketing, promotion, markets in terms of customers, different types of customers, activities, business plans, 3 months in advance, 6 months in advance, year in advance. And I suppose, getting back to one of the points I made earlier, what was it relevant to later in life? Yeah, it was like running a small business. It was like running a little startup, because you had to be all over everything. You had to be over HR. You had to be over sales and marketing. You had to be over people management. And I was there for, 6 years, did really well, was top of every KPI table and all that sort of thing. And then one day I was asked to leave, which was a bit of a shock to me because I was doing so well, but I was called a maverick and didn't fit into the corporate world, which I can understand. And actually, at the time, I was not happy, but I was actually it was a good decision because I was breaking rules. I wasn't adhering to stocking policies. I wanted to make money, and that was it. That was all about. And I wanted to satisfy customer needs. So in the West End of London, I was selling products that weren't on our stocking policy, which the managers were paying cash for other suppliers, taking loads of money, but not actually making loads of profit for the business. But I didn't care about that. I also was not totally impressed with corporate politics because I thought people who weren't that good were getting on because they knew how to play the game and all that sort of thing. And I'm a believer in if you perform well and obviously do it properly. And obviously I've said something there is a bit contradictory, but I thought I was doing the right things and performing better than anybody else. So therefore I should be getting on. And I wasn't. And then I called people out, and that was the next. So I then messed about a bit, and I did work for a terrible startup business called Waterfall Holdings, which had bought 40 pool and snooker clubs from a lovely guy called Barry Hearn, which people probably know. He's now all over darts and boxing. His son's Eddie Hearn's of boxing, and he's also promoting snooker as well. Crafty businessman, dabbled on either side of the law, but the people I worked for there, Waterfall, they'd set this business up, buying these from Barry Hearn, and their idea was to soundproof off the snooker, put in American pool bars, put in sexy bars and pool tables, and make it more Americanized, lots of color and all that sort of thing, and take money. Now, I think in the estate they had it was about 40 odd, about 2 of them ever made money. But where they were very successful at making money, they took lots of money.
Yeah.
But I learned there, one, about, the business plan was just appalling. And secondly, just people management, getting the right people in the right jobs. And I was palpably the wrong person in that job. But also, always remember the guy called Martin Callan was the chief exec. And he was very excited when I joined, because I think he thought I was a bit of a catch. I don't know why, but he did. And the first day, he goes, I've got a surprise for you. And I was like, what's that then? Having already thought, oh Christ, this is not the best job I've taken here. And he produced this Saab cabriolet, it's soft top. And he was all excited about it. And I'm like, I couldn't give a monkeys about cars. And I did say to him, so you can give me more cash and I'll fork in the car.
No.
And he was plainly not happy when I not turned my nose up at it, but I was like, okay, so what? So I was there for a year, and I was down on my uppers really, and I did resign, left, and I tried to find various jobs, and I was still looking at corporate work. And I remember going to Pizza Hut for an area manager's job, and the guy there, halfway through the interview, just turned around and said, "What are you doing here? This is madness." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You're not fit for this. You're a good candidate, but you're not the right fit for us. You should go." And I was like, okay, fair enough. Again, I was a bit gutted that he rejected me. But I always, again, look back to that. I think, actually, that was some good advice as well. And anyway, I was starting to think about, slitting my wrist and that sort of thing, when I just got a phone call, and it was a guy going, he was a recruiter, and he was going, do you fancy going and work in a startup in community pubs? And I was thinking, I've done all this. I've been there. And he goes, look, go and have a chat with Julian Sargent, who turned out to become my business partner. And I had a chat with Julian, and actually I quite liked him. I was like, this is okay. And the second interview was, I was getting married, and I came back off my stag do, having had 4 nights in Barcelona. And I met him, I always remember, I met him in a pub called County Arms in Isleworth. And I was literally in the corner of this pub. I couldn't speak. And he thought it was hilarious. He tried to ask me some questions, but I was like, oh, God. Anyway, he took me on. And from there, actually, I've never really looked back, because I joined, the company was called Wizard Inns, and we were backed by a guy called Guy Hands, who people should know. He certainly back in the 90s and the noughties, he had a pretty big reputation for good and bad. He certainly knew how to make money, and he certainly did things like buying old army accommodation and turning that into housing. He bought a load of petrol stations in Germany and did something with them. and did various other bits and pieces. And I think he still runs a boutique hotel chain with his wife, I think. I could be wrong. But one thing he did do and probably bit off more than he can chew was buy EMI Records, which to you and me is a massive brand. You mentioned that to young people. They're like, oh, who's that? And he fell foul of Phil Collins, I think, if I remember rightly, and fell out with him big time. And it was a disaster. And I think he's done some stuff before and after that, which was successful, but a lot of people know him for that disaster at EMI Records. Anyway, he had bought these pubs actually from Entrepreneur, and he had some money lying around, as you do. And he gave our CEO, a guy called Chris Hutt, he said, look, here's a £15 million interest-free loan. I've got these pubs. I don't know what to do with about 40 of them. Some of them you can sell, change your use. Some of them you can turn into managed pubs. And basically 50-50, it was a 50-50 split. So we saved about 24 of them, I think, and got rid of the rest. From there, we built Wizard up to 65 pubs from a bit of merger and acquisition. We were all unbranded. It was back in the time where Wetherspoons was on the march, the Yates's Wine Lodges, Slug and Lettuce, Hogshead. Everything was branded, and we weren't doing brands at all. And it was really entrepreneurial. You'd walk into a town and go, oh, we've got this pub here. What is the rest of town not doing? And we'd do that. And again, it was a bit like having a little business. And so I was in operations and eventually became commercial director there. Julian, my business partner, was the sort of MD. And we were very lucky enough to be part of a sale, which was run by CitiBank, they were superb. I've got to say, having caused me lots of aggravation in terms of do this, do that at midnight and all that sort of thing. They ran a great sales process and the business got sold for £90+ million. Dear old, our friend Guy was very happy because his 50 million had turned into 85 million or something, or 80 million. And the rest of it was shared, between us, which was the bank had a bit and all that sort of thing. But that probably allowed me a bit of breathing space. We left there. I was also got involved with a third person called Charlie Mowat, who I'll probably mention again in down the track, who had set up his own commercial eco-friendly cleaning business, and I joined his sort of advisory board, and then later on became a sort of ops director, which was great fun. Learned quite a lot from Charlie in terms of sales and systems and all that sort of thing. Also set up my own commercial buying business as well. Got involved with a sports bar or two and other bits and pieces. Was able to spread my wings. And then the year after leaving Wizard, a sort of corporate business came knocking. A guy called Robert Cengiz, I think he still owns quite a lot of property in Mayfair. He bought what was called Laurel Pub Company back then, who had Hogshead and all that sort of thing. And he tried to buy Wizard, and he'd met us as a team, and he was impressed by us, and he said, oh, do you want to come and run Laurel Pub Co? And this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to buy all these other chains and crash them together. And really, all it was a property strategy. So we were like, oh, yeah, why don't we have a go? And we joined, and I always remember the first day walking into, they have an office, and still do have an office, actually, Capability Green in Luton. And walking there going, Jesus, what am I doing here? This is not my bag. And basically did a load of commercial stuff and also looking at the strategy, because what happened was we were buying Slug and Lettuces, we were buying Yates's, we were buying all sorts of bits and pieces, and all these pubs were on the same high streets as their existing stuff. So it was all going around the country going, we'll keep that one, change that to that brand, do this, whatever. And it wasn't the most rewarding, but when we were there, that's when we lost the license to underage drinking. And it was a pub there was two or three, but what I remember was in Portsmouth. I think it was called the Library or something like that. And it was blatantly, it was I can't remember what it was called. Bar Me, it's called. That's right, Bar Me, which was a real young concept. Yeah. Blatantly selling to 16, 18-year-olds. And all it sold was VKs, which you probably know, and a few other products, and taking 26 grand a week. It was a freehold site. So in terms of an actual just profit centre, it was a little gold mine. Yeah. Anyway, please turn up. Oh, we've sent young people in here. They're being served left, right and centre. We're going to shut you down. And that's when, being experienced like we were, we knew how it all works. So generally, you go to get your license back, and you need to demonstrate you've done training, you've done some, you might have let the manager go and all that sort of thing, got somebody else in there, and you've taken steps. So you manage or mitigate how many restrictions they put on the license. And we clearly at that point needed somebody to demonstrate that we weren't selling to 16 and 17-year-olds by doing as what we do now, sending in young people to show that they're asking for ID, here's the data, this is what happened, the times, the days, all that sort of thing. And the only we couldn't find anybody, absolutely nobody. And the only person who was a ex-copper who moved at the speed of a snail, charged £400 an audit, I think it was, or something ridiculous. And as a result, license got loads of restrictions, door teams on all the time, over 25s, it's got to be. I think it went from taking 26 to about 7. So it's a complete disaster. So not long after that, I got the sack for doing something, again, breaking the law, breaking the rules a bit. Though I thought actually I was doing the right thing. But anyway, Julian actually sacked me, which was quite amusing. But then about 3 months later, he joined me on the sack race. And he was still interested in pubs. By this stage, I thought the pub game had gone, actually. You could see, especially in that world of a lot of the pubs we had were late night, student-driven, young persons venues, and all that sort of high street stuff. And more red tape was coming, all that sort of thing. So I was like, I just want to get out. And actually, I was doing stuff with Charlie with his office cleaning stuff and all that sort of thing. And my consultancy was just doing quite well. And Julie was still quite keen. But anyway, we met in, where was it? Great Marlborough Street. It was actually before Starbucks, it was a Seattle coffee company, coffee shop, which then became a Starbucks. And we sat there and he goes, yeah, what are you doing? I was like, I'm doing all right, actually. And he said, oh, do you remember the time we lost that license? I was like, yeah. And he goes, we couldn't find anybody to do it. I said, yeah. And he goes, why don't we ever go? And I was like, really? Mystery shopping? No. Compliance? I was like, no. And then it would have it. I think it was probably 2 days later. I was down the pub, talking to some boys from university, funny enough. And they go, oh, what are you up to now? And I was like, oh, this, that, and everything else. And by the way, in passing, what do you think to this idea? And to a person, they go, if that job was around when I was a student, we'd have all done it. I'm just thinking, yeah, actually, that is true. That is true. And so the idea, so that's where I thought, actually, there's something probably in this.
Yeah.
And we added the further chats. We formed the business, I always remember, 26th of June, 2006. And we then, obviously, and as I already said, we're in the pub game, we're in bar game, so we knew people. But before that, to use those connections, we did do some research. We went to British Library, Charlie joined us and he helped us with the sales plan type thing. But we looked, for example, at the classic addressable market. What is the total addressable market potentially in this country for this sort of service? And I think at the time there was about 65,000 on licenses, because that's all we were interested in.
Yeah.
That's all. We were only interested on licenses, bars, pubs, hotel bars, all that sort of thing, nightclubs. But we weren't interested in off trade. So 65, and we went, if we could do 10, 20% of that, we'd be happy. Not, and I wrote it down here. It was a bit of a little side shuffle, what they call it these days. And it was like, yeah, okay, so this is worth a go. Understood the market, understood how big it was, the potential what we could do, what we could deliver. Went to visit through our connections. And this was the funniest thing. Went to visit a couple of mystery shopping companies under the pretense of, we've been asked by somebody to do this X, Y, Z. Would you do this sort of service in terms of sending 18, 19-year-olds to see if people are asking for ID? And to a person, these companies went, no, never do that. We don't want to police our clients. We want to work with them. And we came out of there going, can you believe we just heard that? So basically the coast was clear.
Yeah.
And as far as we were concerned, the coast was clear. It was like, let's go for it.
Yeah.
So did some trialing, New people, as I said. So Julie knew somebody at Region Inns who was Walkabout and other sort of high street late night bars, tested our process with them, refined it a bit from their feedback. And I think they were our first paying customer in November of 2006. And from there, it was like we knew people because we sold a pub business to Marston's. We knew people there, so we did some work for them. And there was a couple of other bar companies where, Novus was another one who owned Tiger. And we did some stuff with them. And it was, this is all going quite nicely. And Julie was thinking about going off to work for another pub co. And I was thinking, I could do this with the cleaning and with the consultancy stuff and spinning a few plates, but that's how I liked it. And probably the first big game changer was it happened all together, actually. I was on the platform at Clapham Junction. And as you do, just about get on a train, this woman calls out, goes, all right, Ed, how you doing? And it was all called Anne Rogers. And Anne Rogers did all our systems at Wizard Inns, company we sold. And she said, what are you doing? I said, I'm doing this, doing that. And I've got Serve Legal. And she goes, that sounds really interesting. I said, really? Because most people just go, what are you doing that for? And she goes, yeah, I know somebody at a company called First Quench, which actually work freshers off licenses.
Oh.
And I was like, really? She goes, oh, yeah, they've just lost a license to underage drinking in Brighton on the Ditchling Road. And I was like, oh, okay. She goes, yeah, it's their biggest shop in Brighton and it's shut. And you need to ring this guy up. So I ring this guy up and literally, this is what he said. He basically said, you got to come and see me tomorrow because I'll be looking at somebody like you and I can't find anybody. So popped up to Welwyn Garden City, which is the HQ of what other big company? Well, they did have an HQ, they still do, I think. Tesco. Anyway, so Welwyn Garden City has a bit of a soft spot in my life. Anyway, go up to Welwyn Garden City, have a meet with this guy, and he basically, after about 10 minutes, he goes, can you go and visit all of our shops in Brighton and Hove tomorrow? And it's Friday. And I'm like, yeah, of course I am. Of course I can do that. And you walk out, they go, Jesus, how am I going to... I don't know any 18, 19-year-olds in Brighton.
That's interesting in itself, the fact that you chose to just say yes. There was no concern about whether you could do it. It was like, yes.
It's the classic, he's the classic Alan Sugar thing where he gets that. He always tells that story about getting the contract to make skyboxes. And basically they say, yeah, we'll launch the Sky. We need these set-top boxes, blah, 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 blah. Obviously, you've got Amstrad, you can make them. And he walks out there and goes, I've got a Scooby-Doo out of make them. And you say yes, and then you're like going, okay. I was like thinking, shit. I said, Sarah, so that you're my wife. I said, Sarah, do you know anybody who 18, 19 in Brighton? And she goes, oh, Mark. And Mark is and was and still is my accountant. He lives in Brighton. Why don't you speak to Rebecca and Mark? And so I ring him up and he's, don't know, why would I know 18, 19-year-olds? His kids were like 8, 6 and whatever. And then he pauses and goes, oh, yeah, actually, I do know 18. Oh, babysitter. And he goes, look, I always remember her name, Jess Madden, always remember, and even now. He goes, look, ring up Jess, good girl, works hard, and I'm sure she might be up for it. And you're thinking, anyway, ring her up. You don't know who I am, but I got your name and number from Mark. And she's, oh, that's a right result. So what? You're going to drive me around Brighton and Hove, visiting all these off licenses. I keep the drink and you're going to pay me. I said, yeah, that's correct. She goes, that's brilliant because next week I'm going to a massive party and and I'm like, okay, I'll meet you. I think we met somewhere in Brighton. And I just drove her around and my boot was just full of drink, dropped her off. She was delighted. And at the same time, I was texting this guy from First Quench or Freshers, each visit, pass, fail, fast, fail, that sort of thing. And he was loving it, absolutely loving it. He was like, oh, this is great, like our service and all this sort of thing. And he went to court and his license was saved because he could demonstrate that actually he was doing something about it. And he was self-testing and all that sort of thing. So he loved it. And actually, 2 or 3 weeks later, he rings me up again. He goes, "Oh, you got anybody in Glasgow?"
Yes.
And I'm like, "Of course I've got somebody in Glasgow." "Yeah, of course I've got somebody in Glasgow." And he goes, "I've got 400 in and around Glasgow and Lothian."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Can you do that?" "Yeah, no." And that's what he did. But similar time, and this is what I said, about the Tesco Welwyn Garden City, Charlie was going, "Oh, yeah, I know somebody at Tesco's. They're quite high up." And I've got in contact with them, and they set up some meeting. It was like, I remember we were outside, and we were pub people.
Yeah.
And basically, it was like, this is going to be a different sort of world. And expecting the full sort of Monty in terms of they're going to be all over us. Oh, Sid. They're going to be basically asking us for the world and all that sort of thing. And we walked in, and within 5 minutes, they were telling us, "Oh, we use AC Nielsen. This is what we pay them." They never complete any audits in a month, so they're always about 20 short.
Yeah.
The service in terms of the quality of the data is rubbish. It's inaccurate. They get mixed up with sites and all this sort of thing. And basically after half an hour, we were like, we could do all that, and it's the price.
Yeah.
And this is the sort of the agreement. And how about it? And they're like, "Yeah, here you go."
Wow.
So that was a game changer, because suddenly you can put Tesco's on your creds, and all of a sudden it's, "Oh, Waitrose. Oh, Asda." And it was still tough, because I think, look at some of the questions, it was a bit like, "Oh, we don't really want to talk about the fact we could potentially be serving underages.
Yeah.
So can you meet us in this deep, dark room in the basement of our head office?" And basically, don't really share with anybody. It's top secret. And it was a bit early doors. It was a bit, clandestine
Yeah.
and all that sort of stuff. And that was quite a challenge. But I think because we did what we said, we offered a really good value service. It's not only about delivery, it was also about, we offered consultancy. So we did the audits, and then we'd come to them and go, "Here's the benchmarking. You've got these patterns in terms of geography, in terms of time, products bought. You should be thinking about your training, types of staff that were on, certainly daytime. It's all full-timers, and they were probably a bit better trained. And then evening, it was like part-timers, students, and some of them obviously just weren't getting any training whatsoever. If it was busy or not. And it's something quite interesting. If it was busy, the staff were more likely to ask for ID. If it was really quiet, they're bored. And they're just like...
Well, quite interesting.
So we were also tipping up, offering consultancy, which was all part of the price. So we weren't charged for meetings. So it was, whilst we were premiumising, because dealing with 18, 19-year-olds, getting them out to Grimsby on a Friday night isn't easy. It was good value. And we delivered what was asked. Because that was the other thing about other mystery shoppers. It was like, "Oh, yeah, if we could do 80% of them in May, would you give us some leeway for us to complete them in June, if the other 20%? And we're like, "How does that work?" So it was really important to us. And just another thing was, I met a friend of mine I worked with going back to the pubs in the East End of London. He was a year older than me, and he's now got a trampoline business down in South Wales. And we were discussing what we learned and stories and all that sort of thing. And he was saying the one thing I really did learn from that world was how important the customer was. So if the customer gives you feedback, good and bad, always respond. And now it's much easier. What you find now, it just drives me mad with some businesses. If you want to give feedback, generally negative, actually sometimes you want to give good feedback. Sometimes it's like pulling teeth. And to find people to talk to and all that sort of thing, it's impossible. Whereas we always, from day one, pretty much, we always measured our what we call query rate. In terms of percentage of audits that we do in a month, how many queries we getting? Are we sorting them out within 24 hours? Are we sorting them out within 48 hours? And that's always been a massive thing to us. Make it easy to feedback. Make it easy, if we have made a mistake, to let us know, and we will sort it. And also, we will turn that negative into a positive.
Yeah.
So that's suddenly we've got our on-trade customers, very nice. But very soon they were overtaken in terms of volume by supermarkets.
Yeah.
And convenience stores also followed, and round the country, in the UK, Scotland in particular, local authorities have been going out, been doing their own stings. The papers were full of stories as well, Booze Britain, all that sort of thing. So the environment was all for us. That did help us to a degree. But we also tried not to be, oh, we're on the side of the retailers. Oh no, we're on the side of local government. We tried to be right down the middle. And we probably could we have grown a bit quicker if we were a bit more agitating and in people's faces? Maybe. But I think actually people quite liked us for being that. We are here to help, but we're not going to be commenting about what government are saying, and we're not going to be commenting and giving people's top secret data away on the retail side. And I think that was a good move, though it was amazing. We did have a couple of certainly retailers who got quite, because we used to do some PR in the papers, but it was anonymous, and it was a comment about the high street in general in terms of compliance. But we did have a couple of retailers trying to strong arm us and go, you can't release that and all that sort of thing, which was interesting. It's different now. But yeah, back in the day, it was that on trade, off trade, bars, supermarket, convenience stores. And it was a nice little business. And it was probably a lifestyle little thing at the time. And then 2009 came, and we had a meeting with a guy from William Hill, bookies, because we'd begin, what else? What other areas were age related and all that sort of, and that's what you do all the time. You're always thinking about what the other opportunities, how can we stay ahead, without going off subject too much. But for me, I always think there's a film called Once Upon a Time in the West, which basically the opening scene is unbelievably brilliant, and it involves a train which you can hear in the background. And it's an sort of allegory of basically the Wild West. It's set in the West. And there was a Western starting to change with mechanisation coming. And you could hear this train coming. There's no dialogue, there's nothing, just hear the train. And these three gunfighters are waiting on this platform for Charles Bronson. And eventually the train comes, and he gets off the train and shoots all three of them dead. But but for me, that train is always in my head, because that train is there coming to eat me up. And it drove me to look for new markets all the time. So we come back to the bookies, and we'd met the bookies, and the bloke had sat in his chair going, oh, this is really good information. It doesn't really matter that we failed 20 out of 25 shops, which was incredible in itself, because any minor walking into a betting shop, it's illegal and it should be shut down. But he just rocked back in his chair and said, if the day comes, we'll give you a call. And literally, I'd say 6 months later, the Racing Post did a sting on 100 bookies around the country using 16-year-olds to see what happened. And guess how many were asked for ID?
10.
And literally within a week, he rings us up and goes, we better come and have a chat. And the bookies, the way they work is they are competitors of each other, but on certain things, they'll just talk to each other and basically say, this service is good and you better use it. So William Hills introduced us to Ladbrokes, introduced to Corals, Paddy Power, at the time, the Tote, now Betfred, and various others. And within a small space of time, we were doing pretty much every bookies in the country. Interestingly, that didn't then bring our sort of first competition.
It did.
So these guys were using an American mystery shopping company called Retail Eyes, and who then became Market Force, which was the American route. And Market Force basically came in, obviously, we're doing your mystery shopping, and actually we want to do all that age verification stuff as well, and we could do it for this ridiculous price.
Yeah.
And disappointingly, bookies swallowed it, hook, line, and sinker. And I always remember going to Ladbrokes, the head office. It was, I think he's still in Raiders Lane, but he certainly was then. And our guy, who was really nice, he actually, I always remember this guy, but this guy was the scorer at the World Darts Championships. Anyway, he invited us up to his office on the second floor. We sit down and he goes, yeah, bad news, lads. We go somewhere else. And the thing I most remember about it is he then ushered us to the lift, opened the lift door, pushed us into the lift and basically said goodbye. And it was like, okay, yeah, if you don't feel that comfortable about that one. And 6 months later, he then rings us up. And he goes, can you come to Raiders Lane, please? And we're like, oh, what for? Oh, got a special project for you. And on this occasion, he met us at the front door, came into the lift with us, go to his office. Once he explained what was a special project, in need 600 shops needed doing, then took us to the lift again, got in the lift with us, went downstairs, showed us to the car park. And I said to the lad, I said, mate, we're in here. That is like,
Royal.
yeah, exactly. And what would happen was that Market Force, obviously, promised the world, couldn't deliver because, and this does relate to the managing of the 18, 19-year-olds, which we'll probably touch on a bit later, but basically all they used was a self-assigning system. There was nobody at the end of a phone, nobody motivating 18, 19-year-olds to get out of bed, to go and visit a certain part of the country. And so therefore they were like just not getting them done. And because of the importance of the data that we supply, the companies are pretty all over the timescales. So if they're lacking data, they're like, oh, where is it? What happened was Ladbrokes came back, William Hill came back, Corals came back, and that was a real feather in our cap. We learned a couple of things as well that they brought in. But yeah, that was our first bit of heavy competition, which we saw off. And we were in bookies, we're in alcohol. Knives started to appear, cigarettes were also, supermarkets were talking about that. Lottery, we came close to winning the lottery business, which would have been a fantastic win, but never understood why we don't do that. But that's another story. And then to come back to that, you're always looking for new markets, diversify or die, right? So you're always looking for some new thing. And we had, by stage, quite an engaged workforce because of the people at the end of the phone. And because I think we were pretty open about, we deal with 18, 19-year-olds and all this sort of thing. They were asking for more work, especially when it was like, oh yeah, I'm 19 now. I'm 19 and 11 months. So you're going to retire me at 20.
So just for those who are listening, Ed, just tell us a little bit about how many of the agents, so the agents for those that are listening, are those who go and do the buy and shop. And at this point, you will have had how many agents?
But I think at this point we probably had, it's always funny with mystery shopping companies. Some of them we got hundreds of thousands. How many of them actually doing any work is debatable. I would say at this point we had about 1,000 on our books tops, but those actually engage with us and working, I would say probably 400.
Yeah.
And that's been completely honest. I could give you a bullshit story, go, yeah, there's 1,000.
One piece that they're engaged, continue to cover how you manage to keep that cohort engaged.
Yeah, and I'll wind back a bit. On that. So obviously we talked about early on about the pub where I saw my mates and they were like, yeah, if I was a student again, I'd love to do that job. And so therefore, for me, Julian and Charlie, it was a bit like, okay, so how are we going to manage and motivate and engage these 18, 19-year-olds? And because me and Julian were from publand, we were used to having our pub business having areas. So areas of pubs.
Yeah.
And we started thinking, actually, we need sort of these area managers of regions around the country. Initially, we started with 2. So we had somebody running the north and somebody running the south. And the other thing was, what sort of people did we need? And at the time, we were a startup and sort of an area manager role was part-time-ish, really. And I was remembering, I was lucky enough that sometimes I could go and pick the boys up from the playground at Limpsfield And I remember standing there a few times. You could hear generally women talking about, I did used to do this, I did used to do that, but obviously now I can't do it because society, structure, processes don't allow it. And I was thinking, actually, some of these people seem pretty bloody good. And why can't we build some sort of job that allows them to work at home as well as doing that family bit and looking after kids and doing pickups and all that sort of thing? And that's what I did. So the first employee, and she's still with us, Deborah, she started with us in 2007 as the area manager for the North. And then I was on some trip, and this guy who I knew from other pub days, he sold me beer back in the day, he was talking about his wife looking to get back into work. And I said, oh, I think I might have a job for her. And she was an American Chinese woman who, to this day, and we talk about regrets and all that sort of thing, to this day I regret letting her go.
Yeah.
Because she was sensational. Absolutely. For, I think, an 18-month, 2-year spell, literally, she was just brilliant. I remember I was at a New Year's Eve party, and we had these audits to do on New Year's Eve. And she's literally ringing me up going, I've got this bloke to do it, but he needs X amount of money to get it done. And it's 10:30, the pub shuts at 12. And there she is getting it sorted. It's little things like that, which probably at the time you don't think count for anything. That drive and that energy and that sort of will to hit deadlines and stuff like that. That's what you need. So anyway, Deborah ran the North, Cecilia, her name was, ran the South. And they were really good because they knew how to interact with young people.
Yeah.
They knew how to communicate with young people. They were almost like second mothers, some of them. And as we grew, I took on a woman who was a sort of part-time vet, and she did work for us as well.
Yeah.
I took on a woman who'd worked for a library, but just I lost enjoyment of working, I think. And she was a friend of a friend. And yeah, they generally were of a turn type. A couple of teachers really good. One of them, again, still works for me now. Because teachers, again, good communicators and all that sort of thing. But with women, eye for detail. And they're also prepared to give you shit.
Yeah.
And gave me and Julia lots of grief, more often than not. High pride, lots of passion. And that took us a long way, actually. It took us a long way to probably, to about 2012. Yeah. But the business was getting bigger, and area managers, actually, 25 hours wasn't enough. And these women generally didn't want to work full time.
Yeah.
As alluded to already, the 18, 19-year-olds who were looking for more work post 20, it was suddenly like, oh, actually, what the first iteration was, some of them became deputies to these women area managers, because it was like, oh, we can give you a bit of work, and actually they can work when you're not working, type touch, and fill in the hours. And that sort of worked quite well. What you started to notice was the youngsters, 20, 21-year-olds, were starting to push harder and were, I think, making it quite stressful for somebody who's on 25 hours or that sort of thing. Yeah. Gradually, and by this stage, we're doing lots of audits a month, in the thousands. And you could see the strain happening. We needed full-timers. Yeah. And suddenly it was like, okay, so Jenny, who's working with Jill, oh, she's graduating.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, she's got a first. How can I stop her going to M&S, Lidl, whatever else? And it's about speed. It's about getting in front of them, being open and honest about what we can provide, what we can't provide. But also they've come through this pathway of, or they've been really good auditors. And then they've worked for us as like a deputy. Oh, good at that as well. So the job interview is almost done.
Yes.
And literally, okay, we'll take you on. Bang. and you don't have to move too far. Because the other thing I think we were ahead of the game was with basically hybrid working.
Yeah.
So from 2008-9, everybody was working at home. We had a central hub where office functions were in that office, so that was finance and all that sort of thing. But everybody else was all around the country. And we'd also try and make sure that we met up at least for 3 days every month. There's a social, all that sort of thing. But generally, and as it stands now, we've got a big enclave of people in the northeast and around Leeds, enclaves in Cardiff. But it just it's not a barrier to recruiting people. And and that's evolved. So unfortunately, the older people left, which again, that's a regret of mine. But now the business is now populated by, it's well over, I think 60% now of ex-auditors.
The leadership team they've all come through the business, haven't they?
Yeah. So sales and marketing director is an auditor, ops director is an auditor, data director is an auditor, HR manager is an auditor. So that's basically 4 out of the 5 of the SMT. And then below that, middle management, pretty much they all are, I think, which has its challenges because they don't know anything else. And sometimes they would profess that me and Julian were the worst people in the world for not allowing this, that, and everything else, especially some of the more Gen Z type stuff. But as I say, we've always tried to be open and clear about what is acceptable, what isn't acceptable, and also try and listen to some of their feedback, some of which is been really good, some of it not so good, but that's the same with any business. So that's, so the business just evolved through that. And as a result now, it's a pretty young business, pretty dynamic. Yeah. And coming back to the diversification piece, we've always been looking for stuff to use because our community of 18, 19, and actually now 16 to 24, 5-year-olds is just growing and growing. We have a good reputation. A lot of people always recommend. So still about 60% of the people come to us by recommendations.
Right.
And we've also adopted TikTok, which would be brilliant for us, and social media and stuff like that. So we're very good at doing that sort of stuff. But getting back to diversification, so we do all of the Sky Sports, NT Sports is media compliance, which is just going in and seeing when a match is on, if anybody's showing it illegally. The AV side of it still carried on with things like vapes, home deliveries, all that sort of stuff. And at the moment, it's out there in terms of some of the facial recognition and age verification stuff online, porn and so forth, stuff like that. And we're well positioned for that, we think, in terms of exploiting that opportunity. And then there's other services that we have looked at. Allergies, retail outlets is something we look to measure, and also things like revenue protection in sort of supermarkets and all that sort of thing. We do quite well as lots of other bits and pieces. And we've recently bought and acquired business that was more of a mystery shopping business, but also did audits around examinations to see if they were being done properly and stuff like that. We are a compliance business, but we're not afraid to look at other areas.
Yeah. And coming at it from your business has been exceptionally good at spotting an opportunity, being introduced to people, and it's all been self-funded. So we chose not to go down the sort of institutional finance.
Right. Yeah.
Your thought process around that? What?
It was, I think there's a couple of things. Me and Julie are quite old-fashioned in terms of don't like debt, don't like borrowing, don't like owing. It was also, and it has been very cash generative. And in terms of investment, you could argue could we have spent more on our tech and all that sort of thing? Possibly. The two areas of investment are people and tech. And the other thing is, I've been in boardrooms where you've got other interested parties, and it's not great.
Yeah.
It's not great. That's not to say that we haven't developed a board now where we've got independent chairman, CTO, CF, who are pretty independent, I think, and plus the 3 shareholders. And I think that works. And every now and again, we have brought in people that said, we've thought about doing this, or you're not doing that very well, and all that sort of thing. So we also have been open to feedback from outside and people giving us their thoughts. But why give away your crown jewels? You don't have to.
Yeah, yeah. And interestingly, just touching on that subject, you've been very good at where your leadership team, your SLT, have grown up in your business. Just share a little bit about how you've helped them to get external support, because you touched on it. You've got all that positivity of growing up in a business, and it's good so people see that there is some career development and opportunities. But what that brings with it is the mindset that they only know is a serve legal mindset.
Yeah, we have been pretty big on mentoring and coaching and training. Pretty much everybody within a year or two of joining the business is getting, I think, some pretty good training and allowing them the basics of management or sales, whatever else. We've probably been more focused on operations, and sales bit was beefing up more now, because I think we probably do need to become more sort of sales and marketing driven. So that's an area we are improving. Pretty much as they come through the conveyor belt, they do have access to coaching. They do have access to mentoring. Me and Julian have done some stuff as well. I think we've used 3 or 4 different mentors and coaches over the piece. It's not perfect, and it's interesting that I got approached by somebody who do these sort of mentoring boards, so you can send people along and sit around a table, a bit like a sort of advisory board, but with people who are similar to you in terms of their positions, and you can learn and take knowledge that way, which I thought was quite interesting. So we're looking to a bit of that. Certainly young people are all about quals and having a bit of a few letters after their name, which is fine. That's what they want, and I think I quite respect that as well. Yeah, I think that's been a big part of us. Identify talent and then invest in that talent where you can.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about, I guess, your journey in terms of there was you, Julian, Charlie, and more recently over the recent past, Julian and you was leading it operationally, joint founders. And then Julian made the decision that he would step away from the business on an operational point from an exploration.
Yeah, actually, get back. Interesting point to look at. So the 3 of us, I think, are quite different. And I brought Charlie in, and Charlie's not perfect by any stretch. I brought him in because he knew 2 things that me and Julian didn't know much about. One was computers, and the second was sales process. And there is that element of you're better together. And complementing your skills with other people who may know a bit better than you. And I think that's quite important. And me and Julian, we are probably more ops focused. He's probably a bit more, you won't forgive me saying this, but he's probably a bit more corporate-y than I am. But that's quite good because he does work in quite a structured way, and I'm not so structured and all that sort of thing. And I think that really helps us work the best. Do I think I'd have got this far on my own? You don't know, but I don't think so. Actually, I don't think so. And I think I know people sometimes want to say do it all themselves, but I think we've got much further as a result of a threesome.
Yeah.
So going back to you. So I think one thing we've been good at is, or try to be good at, it's not always perfect, is we've always been good about talking about needs, want in our broader life and all that sort of thing, and being honest and saying, yeah, actually at the moment it's all good, but actually, you know what, I might want to retire in 2 years' time. And I think if you're working as a partnership, you do need that. You do need regular, so we get on here, what needs do you want out of the business, what's your plans outside of this? And yeah, we were pretty good. So when it came to Julian stepping back, it took him a bit of time. He did hang around a bit, which was fine, but he was pretty clear. So it wasn't like, oh shit, where's he gone? He basically said, look, this is what I want to do. And he gradually stepped back. And and he was fine. He was like, look, if you need my help, just, you know where I am, really good. But actually, yeah, he got out of the way pretty quick. How was that for me? Yeah, I quite liked it. There was bits of last man standing. There was a bit like that. But actually, yeah, there's sort of the freedom to do as I want was good. But you still got to remember, we are obliged to our shareholders and ourselves. So there's still that sort of handbrake. Yeah, I did think about it. I mean, my mum died about 6 months into that period when I was running the show. That was quite tough because the one thing, I think being a CEO, being a head honcho is quite lonely.
Yeah.
And there's nobody really telling you if you're doing a good job, bad job. You just look at your figures and all that sort of thing. So I think I'm doing a good job. I did have a coach, and that was useful, really useful. And it has helped me, I think, in terms of that piece and having to talk to who's not in the business, X, Y, Z. That I think that really helped me. And actually, in my own head, it helped me realise when it was time to step down.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think having that ability to know, actually, I need to move on from this. I'm not holding the business back, but actually if we bring in somebody else, which hopefully we have done with Kate, who's younger, more relevant, I think that's probably a good word, I think, and got better skills than I have in certain areas, i.e. tech and all that sort of thing, then actually, Christ, if she turns the value of the business from X to Y, who cares?
So sometimes it's difficult to let go when you're being real.
Yeah, you do have some of that. It's funny, you know, I have a couple of occasions I'm thinking, oh no, she's doing this, she's doing that, she can't rate this, can't rate that. But actually, that's what you brought her in. And you do have to park that. You do have to say to yourself, take yourself outside and have a look. But it's hard. You find yourself at board meetings going, oh. So it was funny, the other day, it was like the SMT said, yeah, I think we should have a method of measuring the impact of the board itself and its performance. And I was going, what? But actually, yeah, it makes perfect sense. You can't just, because actually, yeah, it keeps you on your toes, and certainly we can still help and influence the value of the business. And we have got people on EMI schemes and incentives and stuff like that. We have an obligation to everybody or those people to make sure that their scheme is going to be something at the end of it.
Yeah. And it takes time, doesn't it, to transition out as well. Obviously, it was about a year once you decided you were going to.
Yeah, it was interesting. I did a 360 actually, which I've never really done one of those before, but I did it with the team. I thought I was, I think certainly with Death, I was struggling a bit actually. Yeah. And I didn't think I was performing as I should. Did a 360 with the SMT. I thought they gave some really good feedback actually. Yeah. A couple of areas I needed to improve on. To think I did make some changes into how I did stuff. I think on one occasion I apologised, I think, for doing something I shouldn't have done. And I think that sort of allowed me to go into the last year, I think, feeling quite good about myself. Yeah. Actually, I'm doing the right thing, but I'm handing over in the right way. We're not carrying anybody. Everybody's firing on all cylinders, and hand over to Kate to take them from A- to A+ type touch.
Yeah. And I think that's it. I think that's what, for anyone who's listening, who's considering that transition, either completely out of the business or like yourself, even just out of the operational bit, is thinking about it well before. But this is a period of time, isn't it, to do it sensibly?
Yeah. Yeah, I think you've got to have a plan, and you've got to keep thinking about it all the time. You don't have to stick to it rigidly, but I think it's, for me, and I hope the other two will say this, we have, certainly for shareholders, we have an obligation to the shareholders and also to your employees, certainly your best employees, because you are keeper of the keys. We have developed value in our business, and if I'm not performing, I'm not firing all cylinders, then I'm endangering that value, and I'm not doing right by the people who we've brought through, we've developed. I'm not doing right by the shareholders. So that's just not right, is it? I knew when I was done.
You were ready. Yeah. Yeah, just a few some reflections, I guess, now as a little bit of looking back and looking back over the 18 years, is there anything that you do differently if you were starting again, knowing what you know?
I think you do differently. Don't give. Yeah, probably give away. I don't. Yeah, I think we could probably have been a bit more aggressive with some investment. I think in terms of tech and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think that's. I think that's the one area with hindsight we could have gone a bit quicker at.
And do you think that comes full circle at in the beginning of the conversation when you talked about the fact that when you started and you were in that sort of that pub world where it really was about managing the pennies, the pounds, what does it, do you think
Yeah.
stayed with you and with maybe yourself and you?
Yeah, I think that's a good. That is a good point because it, for me anyway, and I think it was the same with you. It was about the bottom line. The bottom line is the bottom line. It was about conversion, and I think also the other areas probably is sales and marketing. We've historically spent absolutely nothing on that and relied on reputation, word of mouth to get us where we are now.
Yeah.
But we want to jet propel the business to another level, and that's where it's at. So it's probably those two areas which probably a little bit go, yeah.
Equally, if you spend the money, you might not be in the situation.
That is the thing, but it hasn't been. Yeah, to be honest, it hasn't been too bad. As I said, but in terms of those are probably two areas of the business which could have, should have. As I say, that I always look at people and think, yeah, I wish I've saved that person or that person down the left because they were really good. Yeah, could we have gone? We went to Australia. Was that a bit of a waste of time? Should we have stuck in Europe? That was probably one thing that wasn't the greatest move, but we still got the business there. It's licensed, so he pays us a bit of money. It's paid itself back. So I think there's probably a couple of acquisitions we might have made at different times. We could have been ruthless about one, but no, the bottom line is you read about no people having regrets. I've got no regrets.
Yeah.
Why would I?
Yeah. Well,
Why would I?
successful business, and you took the path and it's got you where you are now.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about someone who, so there's different phases, as we know, from it's one thing to get business off the ground, it's another one to grow it, scale it, and you've done that, and you're now at that next stage. So what advice, if any, would you give someone who built a business from the ground up about the difference between getting the idea off the ground and getting a bit of money in versus that scale?
I think you got to learn to trust people because unless you do a superb tech play and all that sort of thing, you've got to have some, even though obviously the rise of the robots and all that sort of thing, you've got to have people to help you out.
Yeah.
And in our line of work, you've got to learn to trust people. I think sometimes we did a bit too much micromanagement and we should have learned more about trusting people and believing in them and allowing them just to get on with it, because you can't really scale rapidly if you're too down, if you're down in the weeds and all that sort of thing. You want to be up here thinking strategy, thinking next market, thinking diversification, and thinking speed. And I think that's train your teams, get the right people in the right positions, and let them go.
Yeah. Yes. I think that's a theme that often comes through. And for some people, that's easier to do than for others.
I think for a lot of founders, I think it's really hard. And that definitely, I look back and think, yeah, I probably was micromanaging too much for too long.
It's that sort of, I know I can do it. And if it seems a little bit painful for someone to do it the first, second and third time, it's quicker to do it myself. But it's that making that transition and going, I'm going to sit on my hands.
Exactly.
And they'll make that transition. Or they'll step up and do it. Or they won't, and that's a different conversation.
Correct.
But you never make that transition. And as you say, my observation, certainly founders find that, not all, so find that more difficult than others.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what about, we touched a little bit on it, you've done your own succession planning. We've now got Kate in place, still early doors. But are founders considering their own succession planning? What lessons did you learn about that process that you might want to share?
What lessons did I think it was a bloody good process, to be honest, and I don't know who ran that, but they did a great job. For one, I think pick the right fit in terms of the recruiter. A couple of recruiters would pass over my desk. I was going, why would I want to choose them? Far too corporate, far too rigid, I think. So unlikely to, and actually, I just don't think they had a feel for what we were about. So I think it's really important your recruiter has a feel for what you're about, understands your culture, gets it.
Yeah.
And I think actually once you do that, and then be clear about what you want, part your ego. I think it's interesting. Kate has got some background in hospitality, and I think that's, I don't know whether you admit, I think that's important to both of us, because I think people who've been in hospitality generally are quite open, quite sociable, like people. So I think you then get some sort of identikit, you're building up some sort of picture. I think if that helps, they're a bit like you, but they don't have to be exactly like you. But that was one thing. I think also I think we came out of the process, we did have, I thought, three different types of different types of candidate, which again was great. But what else do you want me to say? It is about clarity, isn't it? You get your job spec down, key traits, key sort of skills. Yeah, it's about being clear and being consistent. And if you don't have a job spec, if you don't have a job description, if you're a bit unsure about the type of person you want, you're going to fail. Simple as.
It's amazing, though, how often people start off on that journey without that clarity. And then, unsurprisingly, it doesn't go well. So let's park that one. So, a funny question, but so there are lots of myths out there about scaling business. So you can read it, how wonderful it is, how easy it is. Follow these 10 steps you need to know and take random on and call. So what more?
It's not easy. And to start with, if I had £1 for every time I had a mate of mine say, "Oh, Ed, I wish I'd done what you've done." And you go, why am you then? Oh, too much risk, too much of the unknown. So it's not easy. It's not easy. It's good fun, but it's also stressful, also risky, and yeah, it's a lot of hard graft. It's a lot of hard graft. And I was next door is the bedroom where I used to do all the sort of initial serve legal work. Joss was probably 3 at the time, 2 at the time, and that's where I was, in my bedroom. Classic, me and Julie were doing it in our bedrooms and working weekends to make sure stuff got done, driving people around to make sure stuff got done, panicking about, oh no, we're going to lose that. We lost Tesco's to TNS, and that was like, bloody hell, that's not great. When I mentioned to you about the competition in the bookies, I had to make somebody redundant. And I don't care who you are, that is the shittest, sorry. Yeah. That is the worst thing to do in life.
Yeah.
COVID, had no sales.
Yeah.
No sale, no revenue for 6 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to this podcast to demystify it, because there's so many things out there. It's great, like you say, it's fun to be an entrepreneur, but it is bloody hard.
Yeah, it's not. It's interesting. So I mentioned COVID there, and it was funny. After sort of the dust settled on COVID, me and Julian met, I think, for a coffee, and he said, "Oh, what did you think to the impact of COVID?" I said, before it came, I was getting a bit bored with the business, but actually, when it arrived, it was like having a shot in the arm. You see, it was a bit like the old days. It was a bit like, we've got no sales. What we need to do, where we need to find money, where's the cash flow? We've got to pay the staff. What we're going to do, all that sort of thing. And he was going, it was exactly the same. I loved it.
Like an injection again.
Yeah, and you have to be prepared for the adrenaline rush, the roller coaster, the 4 o'clock phone call on a Friday saying, yeah, actually, we're going somewhere else. And somebody who's been a good member of staff goes, I'm off, goes somewhere else. Or it's only happened to us once where we had a complete outage on our system on a Friday night. But those are the things where actually, I think for us, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs, they're the things that really drive you forward. because it's exciting. It is adrenaline fueled. It is, but it's bloody hard work.
It is interesting. I do think that entrepreneurs are a particular breed.
Yeah, no, I mean, exactly. And I think it was funny. For a long time, when my mates, so you're lucky, what you've done. And I say, yeah, you're lucky. But actually, I don't adhere to that anymore. I just don't. We were in the right place, yes. We were at the right time, yes. But you need to exploit that opportunity. And we've done that to the max.
Without a doubt. And I think that is a fantastic point to finish, because it's absolutely true.
Yeah. And I suppose that's the other thing. If you come back to me, what do you regret? I don't have any regrets, but actually I should have been more proud of what we've done. I've been too late on that one, I reckon.
No, never too late. Never too late, I think. And that's what these kinds of things are like. And do a lot when you go and talk in schools. Now are taking more opportunities to do that kind of stuff. I think they're the bits where, giving yourself a pat on the back. There are lots of opportunities out there.
Yeah.
Not everyone will go and take them. It's just being okay with discomfort. When you're in it, it doesn't always feel great.
Yeah.
But actually you go, oh, do you know what? I quite enjoy that. You feel comfortable. Bring it on.
Exactly. And I think you're right. Living with discomfort is a way of describing certainly my beginning and middle part of my working life. As much as I enjoyed it.
Corporate world, which is something you said for to work in a corporate world. It comes back to that sort of environmental piece. Some people work better in environment and some work better in others. There are obviously in my day jobs, it's a case if someone can have the right skills and capabilities to do a job, but doing it in a different environment means something completely different. An entrepreneurial startup and a scale-up is very different from a corporate world, and they require very different motivations, behaviours and all that good stuff.
That's it for this episode of Scaling Stories Unfiltered. If you got value from today's conversation, hit the subscribe and leave a comment. It helps us bring even more real conversations your way. Got a scale-up challenge, a story to share, or want to recommend someone for me to interview? Drop me a note in the comments below. Until the next time, keep scaling, keep learning, and remember, you're not alone on your scale-up journey.